Constantinople, now called Istanbul, was once the beating heart of an empire. For over 1,000 years, it stood at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, where cultures mixed and power shifted with the tides of history. Behind its great walls, emperors ruled and scholars kept alive the wisdom of the ancient world. But by 1453, the city faced its darkest hour. A rising force from the east gathered at its gates, ready to strike. Its streets grew quiet, its defenders few, yet within the walls, hope remained. This is the story of the fall of Constantinople, the end of an empire, and the dawn of a new age in the city we now know as Istanbul. In this episode of Restful Historian, we will delve into the final days of Constantinople, the clash of empires, and the birth of a new world from the ashes of the old. So, settle in, take a deep breath, and let's ease into tonight's story together. Chapter 1: The Enduring Empire, Constantinople and the Byzantine Legacy. At the very crossroads of continents, a geographical nexus where the vast landmasses of Europe and Asia converge in a narrow embrace, there rose a city that for over 1,000 years stood as an unyielding sentinel, a golden jewel defying the relentless tides of history. This was Constantinople, a metropolis born of audacious imperial vision, forged by Christian faith, and destined not merely to exist, but to become a living legend, the vibrant capital of a Roman Empire that, against all odds, adamantly refused to die for centuries after its Western counterpart had crumbled. To truly comprehend the profound tragedy and world-altering significance of its final fall, one must first grasp the immense, enduring spirit and the unique, multifaceted legacy it tirelessly upheld for more than a millennium. Our exhaustive journey through the life of this extraordinary metropolis begins not in its twilight years, but in its very dawn, with the audacious and strategic vision of a single, transformative figure, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. In the early 4th century CE, the colossal Roman Empire was undergoing a seismic, systemic transformation. The old city of Rome, steeped in pagan traditions and geographically distant from the empire's increasingly important eastern frontiers, was no longer suitable as a sole administrative capital. Constantine, having consolidated his power and embraced Christianity, sought a new seat of imperial power, a city that could not only reflect the dawn of a new, Christianized era but also strategically command the empire's vital eastern and northern borders. His discerning gaze, guided by both pragmatism and what he believed to be divine inspiration, fell upon the ancient Greek city of Byzantium. This modest, unassuming settlement was perched on a triangular promontory of land, a natural peninsula that jutted into the shimmering waters where the Marmara Sea met the Bosphorus Strait. Its location was nothing short of a geographical masterpiece, a natural fortress almost entirely surrounded by water, the Marmara Sea to the south, the formidable Bosphorus to the east, a narrow, powerful current connecting the vast Black Sea to the Mediterranean, and a deep, sheltered natural harbor to the north, famously known as the Golden Horn. This site offered unparalleled advantages for both defense, with natural maritime barriers, and for trade, controlling the vital Black Sea routes. It was, in essence, a strategic blank canvas, a natural fortress awaiting the monumental brushstrokes of imperial will. From 324 CE, for 6 fervent and intensive years, a colossal construction effort unfolded on a scale reminiscent of Rome's own founding myths. Architects, engineers, and countless laborers, drawn from across the empire, toiled relentlessly to transform Byzantium into a city truly worthy of an empire's new heart. Grand avenues, such as the Mies, were laid out with meticulous precision. Magnificent imperial palaces rose, adorned with classical statuary and Christian symbols. Vast forums, including the Forum of Constantine and the Forum of Theodosius, were carved from the hillsides, designed to awe and gather the populace. Immense underground cisterns were excavated to ensure a fresh water supply for a burgeoning population. and colossal defensive walls began to encircle the nascent metropolis, extending far beyond the old Greek fortifications. When finally consecrated with grand ceremony in 330 CE, this gleaming new capital was officially christened Nova Roma, the New Rome. While that formal title would endure in imperial rhetoric, the city swiftly became universally known by its founder's name, Constantinople, the city of Constantine. It was envisioned as more than a mere capital. It was a sanctuary, a new global nexus, designed to be impregnable and eternal. This new Rome was far more than just another administrative center. It became the vibrant, pulsating heart of the Eastern Roman Empire, a civilization that would proudly uphold the mantle and traditions of Rome for over 1,000 years after its Western counterpart famously collapsed amidst barbarian incursions in 476 CE. While modern historians, for clarity and distinction, often refer to it as the Byzantine Empire, a term derived from its ancient Greek name, Byzantium, its inhabitants never used this designation. They always saw themselves, unequivocally, as Romans, Romaioi in Greek, and their emperors as direct, unbroken successors to the likes of Augustus, Trajan, and, of course, Constantine himself. Yet, over the centuries, this Roman legacy gracefully evolved and adapted to its new Eastern milieu, forging a unique identity. Greek, the dominant language of the Eastern Mediterranean, gradually replaced Latin as the official tongue of the court, administration, and scholarship. The Christian faith, specifically its Orthodox branch, became inextricably woven into the very fabric of Byzantine identity, deeply influencing its art, its complex legal codes, its elaborate imperial rituals, and its unique cultural expression. Byzantium stood as a formidable bastion of both Hellenic, Greek, and Roman traditions, tirelessly preserving and meticulously copying vast libraries of classical knowledge, the profound philosophical treatises of Plato and Aristotle, the epic histories of Thucydides and Livy, the scientific works of Ptolemy and Euclid, and the intricate legal codes of Justinian. This invaluable intellectual legacy, meticulously safeguarded by generations of Byzantine scholars, would otherwise have been largely lost to Western Europe during its so-called Dark Ages, only to be painstakingly rediscovered centuries later, sparking the Renaissance. Constantinople was a true cultural crucible, where ancient learning met Christian theology, producing unparalleled achievements in intricate mosaics, like those in the Chora Church, the groundbreaking dome architecture, culminating in the breathtaking, revolutionary structure of the Hagia Sophia, illuminated manuscripts of unparalleled beauty, and sophisticated philosophical and theological scholarship. The city itself, by virtue of its very design and meticulous fortification, became an architectural and defensive marvel, arguably the most formidable fortress in the entire medieval world, a testament to strategic genius and engineering prowess that remains awe-inspiring even today. Its legendary reputation for impregnability rested chiefly on the colossal Theodosian walls, a monumental system of land fortifications completed in the 5th century CE under Emperor Theodosius II. These were not merely single barriers, but a sophisticated, multi-layered defensive network designed with an almost cruel efficiency to absorb, slow, and ultimately break the momentum of any attacking force. This intricate, redundant design created an almost impregnable barrier, forcing any attacker to breach multiple, deadly obstacles under a relentless hail of arrows, stones, and the terrifying Greek fire. This mysterious incendiary weapon, the precise formula of which remains lost to history, was a Byzantine secret weapon, a highly flammable liquid that could be projected from siphons onto enemy ships or siege engines, burning fiercely even on water. These walls, a monument to human defiance, had repelled countless invaders for over 1,000 years. The ferocious Goths, the terrifying Huns under Attila, the Avars, the immense Arab Caliphate during prolonged and devastating sieges in the 7th and 8th centuries, the marauding Rus, Vikings, and the powerful Bulgars. Each time, the walls stood firm, earning Constantinople the revered reputation of being unconquerable, truly a God-protected city in the eyes of many, its very existence seen as a divine testament to its unique status. This physical strength was intrinsically linked to its geopolitical significance. Controlling the Bosphorus Strait meant taxing all maritime trade between the wealthy Black Sea region and the bustling Mediterranean, making the city immensely rich and a magnet for commerce, while its formidable peninsular geography protected it from most large-scale land-based assaults, funneling any would-be attackers into narrow, exposed fronts where their numerical superiority could be negated. Yet, by the 15th century, the glorious Byzantine Empire, despite its unparalleled past, was but a pale shadow of its former, expansive self. Centuries of relentless pressure, both external and internal, had slowly but surely eroded its power, wealth, and territorial integrity. The devastating Arab sieges in the 7th and 8th centuries, particularly the massive one from 717 to 718 CE, though ultimately repelled, had drained its manpower and resources, marking the beginning of a long struggle for survival. Internal religious strife, such as the periods of iconoclasm in the 8th and 9th centuries, further destabilized the empire and consumed vital energy. The strategic heartland of Anatolia, the empire's primary source of soldiers and agricultural wealth, began to be irrevocably lost to the Seljuk Turks following the catastrophic Battle of Manzikert in 1071. This devastating defeat stripped the empire of its breadbasket and recruitment grounds, leading to a long period of decline, punctuated only briefly by periods of resurgence such as the Komnenian Restoration in the 12th century, which saw a temporary revival of imperial strength and influence, proving the empire's extraordinary resilience even in the face of adversity. However, the most crippling blow, the wound from which the Byzantine Empire would never truly recover, came not from a traditional enemy, but from within the Christian world itself. The Fourth Crusade in 1204 CE saw misguided, rapacious Western European crusaders, heavily influenced by Venetian mercantile interests, brutally sack and occupy Constantinople. This traumatic act of plunder was an unimaginable horror. Churches were desecrated, holy relics stolen or destroyed, the city's vast wealth in gold, jewels, and priceless artifacts systematically looted, and its population subjected to unimaginable violence. The city, which had withstood centuries of non-Christian sieges, succumbed to the avarice of its supposed allies. The Crusaders then established the short-lived Latin Empire, a period of foreign rule that inflicted immense physical destruction, decimated the city's population through death, flight, and economic collapse, and created an irreparable, festering schism between the Eastern Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. This unholy betrayal left a deep psychological scar on the Byzantine psyche, fostering an enduring distrust of the Latin West. Though the Byzantines eventually reclaimed their capital in 1261, expelling the Latin occupiers and re-establishing the Paleologan dynasty, the empire they inherited was a mere fragment of its former self. Its territory was tiny, a scattering of small, often disunited territories in Greece and the Balkans. Its treasury was utterly exhausted, its once bustling trade routes largely usurped by the Italian maritime republics. The city itself, though once again the capital, was a hollow shell of its former glory. Vast sections within the venerable Theodosian walls had reverted to open fields or even farmland, a haunting contrast to its bustling peak of over 1 million inhabitants. The population had dwindled catastrophically, struggling to recover from the ravages of war, plague, and sustained economic depression. By 1453, the once sprawling Roman Empire was effectively reduced to little more than Constantinople itself, its immediate surroundings, and a few isolated outposts across the Aegean Sea, barely clinging to existence. The city, though still magnificent in its core, bore the visible scars of this protracted decline. Its once formidable army was now a mere fraction of its historical strength, reliant on dwindling local levies and expensive, often unreliable, foreign mercenaries. Its once unassailable position was increasingly tenuous, surrounded on all sides by the rapidly expanding and fiercely ambitious Ottoman Empire, a new, dynamic power with a profound desire to claim the Queen of Cities and, with it, the symbolic legacy of Roman Imperium. The stage was set, not for an attack on a vibrant, powerful empire, but for a desperate last stand, the final, agonizing act of a thousand-year drama, a poignant end to a civilization that had steadfastly defied oblivion for more than 10 centuries. Chapter 2: The Rising Tide, the Ottoman Empire and Sultan Mehmed II. As the venerable walls of Constantinople stood silent witnesses to centuries of past glories and present decay, a new and profoundly dynamic power was rapidly ascendant in the East, the Ottoman Empire. Born from humble beginnings in the crucible of Anatolia, this burgeoning force would not only lay siege to the ancient Roman capital but would ultimately absorb its legacy and reshape the geopolitical map of the world. To understand the sheer scale of the challenge that faced Constantinople in its final hour, we must first trace the meteoric rise of this formidable, expansionist state. The genesis of the Ottomans lies in the late 13th century, amidst the fragmented aftermath of the Seljuk Sultanate's decline in Anatolia. Hundreds of small, independent Turkish principalities, known as beyliks or Ghazi emirates, named for their adherence to the Gaza, or wholly raiding into Christian lands, vied for dominance. Among these, on the extreme northwestern frontier, closest to the beleaguered Byzantine Empire, emerged a chieftain named Osman I. From his modest territory, Osman, from whom the name Ottoman derives, began to expand his influence through raiding, strategic alliances, and the charismatic leadership of his warriors, who were drawn by the promise of spoils and spiritual reward. What set the Ottomans apart was not just their martial prowess, but a remarkable pragmatism, an ability to absorb and integrate conquered peoples, their skills, and even their military technologies, into their own evolving state structure. Through successive generations, the Ottoman star ascended with astonishing speed. Osman's son, Orhan, expanded into Byzantine lands in Anatolia, securing Bursa as an early capital. Crucially, in the mid-14th century, the Ottomans made their first decisive leap into Europe, crossing the Dardanelles Strait into the Gallipoli Peninsula, a strategic beachhead that would prove invaluable for future expansion. Under Murad I, the empire's growth accelerated dramatically. He solidified Ottoman control over much of Anatolia and, more significantly, pushed deep into the Balkans, conquering Serbia, Bulgaria, and reaching into Greece. The pivotal Battle of Kosovo in 1389 saw Murad I secure a decisive victory over a coalition of Balkan forces, forever changing the power balance in southeastern Europe and cementing Ottoman dominance in the region. It was also under Murad that the Janissaries were formally instituted, an elite corps of highly disciplined infantry, comprised of Christian boys conscripted through the Devsham system, converted to Islam, and rigorously trained from a young age to be loyal only to the Sultan. These formidable warriors, armed with advanced weaponry and unparalleled morale, provided the Ottomans with a standing army unlike any other in Europe or the Middle East. Murad's successor, Bayezid I, continued this relentless expansion, earning the epithet the Thunderbolt for his swift campaigns. He besieged Constantinople for the first time in the early 15th century, a prolonged but ultimately unsuccessful attempt, foreshadowing the city's eventual fate. His advance, however, was dramatically halted by a sudden and formidable challenge from the east, Tamerlane, the Central Asian conqueror, who inflicted a crushing defeat upon Bayezid at the Battle of Ankara in 1402. This catastrophic loss plunged the Ottoman Empire into a period of severe internal crisis, known as the Ottoman Interregnum, where rival princes fought for the throne. Many in Europe hoped this marked the end of the Ottoman threat. Yet, the Ottomans demonstrated an extraordinary resilience. Under Murad II, Mehmed II's father, the empire was painstakingly reconsolidated and rejuvenated. Murad II firmly re-established central authority, rebuilt the army, and resumed expansion, notably crushing a renewed European crusade at the Battle of Varna in 1444. By the mid-15th century, the Ottoman state was not just recovered, it was stronger, more centralized, and more technologically advanced than ever before. Its territories now stretched from the Danube River in Europe, across the Balkans, and deep into Anatolia, firmly dominating both the European and Asian shores of the Bosphorus Strait. Constantinople, the once sprawling heart of an empire, had been reduced to a solitary island of Roman heritage, an ancient, isolated jewel almost entirely encircled by burgeoning Ottoman territory. It was into this world, poised for a dramatic confrontation, that Sultan Mehmed II was born in 1432. He ascended to the Ottoman throne in 1451, a mere 19 years old, yet possessing a mind of astonishing intellect, fierce ambition, and an almost singular, unyielding focus. Unlike many young rulers, Mehmed was no mere figurehead, he was a true polymath and a visionary strategist. He was fluent in several languages, including Arabic, Persian, Latin, and Greek. He devoured history, poring over accounts of legendary conquerors like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Tamerlane, meticulously drawing lessons from their military strategies and their pursuit of universal dominion. His education was rigorous, encompassing science, mathematics, and philosophy, guided by renowned scholars. But above all, Mehmed possessed an almost messianic zeal, driven by a deep, personal conviction that he was destined to fulfill an ancient Islamic prophecy, the conquest of Constantinople. For him, the city was not merely a strategic prize, it was the ultimate symbol of universal dominion, the ultimate inheritor of the Roman legacy, and its capture would irrevocably legitimize his claim as the rightful emperor of both East and West. He saw the capture of the city as a necessary step to consolidate his burgeoning empire, to control the vital trade routes between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, and to establish a new, grand imperial capital befitting his aspirations. From the moment he secured his throne, Mehmed II's actions were singularly focused on this ultimate goal. He quickly neutralized potential internal rivals and negotiated temporary peace treaties with his European neighbors, securing his borders and ensuring no immediate distractions. Then, with ruthless efficiency and strategic brilliance, he began his direct preparations for the siege of Constantinople. His first audacious move was the construction of a formidable new fortress on the European side of the Bosphorus, directly opposite an older Ottoman fort, Anadolu Hisar, on the Asian side. This new bastion, named Rumeli Hisar, or Fortress of Rumelia, was a marvel of rapid military engineering, completed with astonishing speed in just 4 months in 1452. Its massive, strategically placed towers and thick walls allowed the Ottomans to exert absolute, undisputed control over all maritime traffic through the strait, effectively cutting off Constantinople's last direct lifeline to the Black Sea and preventing any potential aid or vital supplies from reaching the beleaguered city from that direction. Its intimidating presence was a clear declaration of intent. Simultaneously, Mehmed poured immense resources into acquiring and developing the most advanced and destructive weaponry of his age. He secured the services of Urban, a highly skilled Hungarian master cannon founder, who had initially offered his services to the Byzantines but was rejected due to their lack of funds. Urban promised to cast cannons capable of breaching any wall. The result was a series of monstrous artillery pieces, culminating in the infamous Great Bombard, or the Basilic. This colossal siege cannon was a true wonder of destructive engineering, estimated to be over 27 feet, 8.2 meters, long, it was capable of firing immense stone balls, some weighing over 1,200 pounds, 540 kilograms, across immense distances with devastating force. The logistical challenge of merely transporting this gargantuan weapon, pulled by dozens of oxen and thousands of men, was itself an unprecedented feat. This monstrous cannon represented a terrifying new chapter in the art of siege warfare, a technological leap that would fundamentally alter the dynamics of fortress defense. Mehmed was leaving nothing to chance. He was meticulously preparing every aspect of his immense military machine, driven by a relentless will and a singular, unyielding obsession, the complete subjugation of Constantinople. The stage was now set, not for a mere siege, but for a confrontation of epic proportions, a clash between a thousand-year legacy and the unstoppable force of a burgeoning empire. Chapter 3: The Beleaguered City, Constantinople on the Eve of Siege. Having thoroughly explored the formidable rise of the Ottoman Empire and the unyielding ambition of its young sultan, Mehmed II, our gaze now returns with solemnity to Constantinople. By April of 1453, the once unassailable capital, the last defiant bastion of Roman heritage, stood not merely as a city, but as a stark, living symbol of its own protracted, agonizing decline. Stripped of its vast imperial territories, its once overflowing coffers emptied by centuries of warfare and economic attrition, and its people weary beyond measure, the Queen of Cities was compelled to confront the gravest, most existential threat in its more than thousand-year history. Its formidable walls, though still standing, now enclosed a heart weakened not only by the overwhelming external pressure of a burgeoning empire but by deep, pervasive internal divisions. The demographic reality of 15th-century Constantinople was a grim, undeniable testament to centuries of relentless decline. From its glorious peak population, estimated to have soared to perhaps over 1 million inhabitants in the High Middle Ages, a true metropolis by any standard, the city had shrunk catastrophically. By 1453, the number of its residents may have dwindled to as few as 50,000 to 70,000 souls, a mere fraction of its former vibrancy. This catastrophic reduction was the cumulative, devastating result of multiple, interconnected factors, recurrent waves of devastating plagues, particularly the infamous Black Death, which repeatedly swept through Europe from the mid-14th century onwards, leaving swathes of death and demographic collapse in its wake, the constant drain of manpower through centuries of endemic warfare and continuous border skirmishes, famines that periodically struck the region, and, perhaps most acutely and irreversibly, the calamitous impact of the Fourth Crusade in 1204. That unholy assault had not only plundered the city's immense wealth but also triggered a profound demographic exodus through violence, economic disruption, and the subsequent establishment of a Latin occupation that lasted for over half a century. The urban landscape itself bore the visible scars of this demographic hemorrhaging. Vast districts within the famed Theodosian walls, once bustling with life, commerce, and intricate urban dwellings, had by now become desolate, overgrown fields, often repurposed for rudimentary agriculture or even livestock grazing. Crumbling palaces, abandoned churches, and public spaces reclaimed by nature offered haunting reminders of the city's lost vibrancy and served as a poignant, silent backdrop to its impending doom. The economic state of the Byzantine Empire, and thus of Constantinople, mirrored its profound demographic decay with unnerving precision. The imperial treasury was chronically and desperately impoverished, a stark and painful contrast to the immense wealth that once flowed through its once monopolized trade routes. The control of vital land and sea trade routes, which had for centuries been the lifeblood of the Byzantine economy, had largely been wrested away by the ambitious and powerful Italian maritime republics like Venice and Genoa. Increasingly, these routes fell under the dominion of the rapidly expanding Ottomans themselves, who now effectively controlled both land passages into Europe and, with the construction of Rumeli Hisar, vital segments of the Bosphorus Strait. This severe financial constraint translated directly into a critical inability to pay for essential services. There were insufficient funds to maintain a large standing army, to adequately repair the city's formidable defenses, or even to consistently provide basic necessities for its remaining population without external help. The imperial currency had been repeatedly debased over centuries, reflecting its dwindling economic power, and the empire was often forced to rely on humiliating foreign loans or concessions. This economic decline had a direct and dire impact on the city's physical integrity. While the legendary Theodosian walls remained an architectural marvel and fundamentally strong in their design, they were not impervious to the ravages of time, earthquake, and the cumulative effects of past battles. They required constant, costly maintenance and regular repairs, as well as sufficient manpower to defend their immense length, all resources that were now in painfully short supply. Detailed accounts suggest that while the main inner wall remained largely intact, many sections of the outer wall were crumbling, their stones loosened, and their mortar decaying. The vast, open spaces between the inner and outer defenses, originally designed as deadly killing grounds for attackers, were in many places cluttered with debris, overgrown vegetation, and even small, informal settlements, hindering the quick movement of defenders and tactical maneuvers during an assault. The sheer scale of the city's perimeter, stretching some 14 miles, 22 kilometers, meant that even with its ancient strength, it required a massive garrison for proper, effective defense. The critical shortage of available manpower meant that the few thousand defenders would be stretched catastrophically thin, leaving large sections of the walls with minimal, if any, continuous vigilance, vulnerable to a determined probe or a surprise attack. Perhaps the most agonizing and crippling weakness that plagued Constantinople on the eve of the Ottoman siege was its profound political and religious divisions. For centuries, the theological schism between the Orthodox Church of the East and the Roman Catholic Church of the West had festered, deepening its roots in fundamental differences in doctrine, such as the Filioque clause regarding the Holy Spirit, ritualistic practices, and, crucially, the Roman papacy's assertion of universal ecclesiastical authority. The Byzantine emperors, desperate for military aid from the powerful kingdoms of Western Europe to counter the encroaching Ottoman threat, had repeatedly sought a formal union of churches with Rome. The most significant of these desperate attempts occurred at the Council of Florence in 1439, where Emperor John VIII Palaiologos and a delegation of Orthodox prelates formally accepted papal supremacy and Latin theological positions, in exchange for the fervent promise of substantial Western military assistance. Chapter 4. The opening salvo, Ottoman preparations, and the siege begins. Having witnessed the precarious, deeply beleaguered state of Constantinople, beleaguered and isolated, and having explored the formidable rise of the Ottoman Empire under the unyielding ambition of its young Sultan, Mehmed II, our narrative now propels us directly to the threshold of destiny. The stage for the ultimate confrontation was not merely set by strategic intent and ancient prophecy, but by an assembly of military might unprecedented in its sheer scale and terrifying technological innovation. It was a monumental convergence of iron, fire, and indomitable human will that would forever alter the course of empires, ushering in a new age. As the crisp air of early spring descended upon the Ottoman lands in 1453, a colossal force began its inexorable convergence on the ancient, legendary walls of Constantinople. Sultan Mehmed II, with a methodical precision and a cold calculation that utterly belied his mere 19 years of age, had personally orchestrated the mobilization of an army of staggering, almost unimaginable proportions. While precise historical estimates vary, contemporary accounts and modern analyses suggest a combatant force numbering anywhere from 80,000 to a staggering 150,000 seasoned warriors, supported by an even larger, untold multitude of non-combatant auxiliaries, skilled engineers, countless labors, and an immense train of camp followers. This was no mere disorganized horde, however. It was a highly organized, centrally commanded military machine, comprised of diverse yet specialized units, each playing a crucial role in the impending onslaught. At its disciplined core were the elite janissaries, numbering perhaps 10,000 to 12,000. These were the Sultan's personal troops, a highly trained and fiercely loyal infantry corps, initially formed through the Devsham system, which conscripted Christian boys from conquered territories and raised them in strict Islamic and military discipline. Armed with their signature composite bows, sharp swords, and increasingly, with early, cumbersome but powerful hand cannons or arquebuses, they were renowned for their unwavering discipline, their formidable combat prowess, and their almost fanatical devotion to the Sultan. Alongside them marched the Azaps, light infantry drawn from Anatolian peasantry, forming the eager bulk of the army's vanguard. Often lightly armed, but numerous and possessed of a ferocious, often zealous, willingness to fight, they were frequently thrown into the initial assaults, designed to absorb the first wave of casualties and exhaust the defenders. The formidable Sipahis, the Sultan's feudal cavalry, numbering in the tens of thousands, brought with them a centuries-old tradition of mounted warfare, skilled in both close-quarters combat and ranged attacks with their bows. They served not only in direct assaults but also in skirmishing, guarding the Ottoman flanks, and maintaining the vast siege lines. Supporting this immense fighting force was a vast and meticulously organized logistical train, endless lines of camel caravans laden with vital supplies, hundreds of wagons groaning under the weight of ammunition and provisions, and dedicated corps of specialized engineers, master sappers for undermining walls, and highly skilled artillerymen, many of whom were renegade Christian specialists drawn by the promise of immense pay. The sheer logistical feat of assembling, feeding, equipping, and moving such an immense army across vast distances in the 15th century, then sustaining it for weeks, was itself a monumental achievement, a profound testament to the Ottoman Empire's burgeoning administrative efficiency and its young sultan's unyielding iron will. But the most terrifying harbingers of this impending storm, the true symbol of a new age of warfare, were the Ottoman cannons, spearheaded by the infamous Great Bombard, the basilic, cast by the ingenious Hungarian master foundryman Urban. This colossal weapon was born from Mehmed's direct commission after Urban, disheartened by the impoverished Byzantines' inability to pay for his services, defected to the Sultan's court. The journey of these gargantuan guns from the Ottoman capital of Adrianople, modern Edirne, over 140 miles, 225 kilometers, away, was an epic and arduous undertaking in itself, a logistical nightmare transformed into a triumphal procession. The basilic, weighing perhaps 19 tons and firing stone projectiles weighing over half a ton, required a team of hundreds of oxen to slowly drag it, along with thousands of men who labored ceaselessly to clear the path, level roads, and construct temporary bridges and ramps over challenging terrain. It could advance only a few miles a day, a slow, agonizing procession, but its very approach, heralded by rumbling earth and distant groans of strained timber, sent shivers of dread through every settlement along its route. Its eventual arrival at the walls of Constantinople in early April was not merely a military deployment. It was a stark, brutal declaration of intent, a visible manifestation of a terrifying new era of warfare where ancient stone walls, no matter how formidable, might finally meet their match. Accompanying the formidable land army was a significant Ottoman fleet, numbering anywhere between 100 and 150 warships, including agile galleys propelled by oars and sails, larger transport vessels, and numerous smaller, nimble fusters. Under the shrewd command of Sultan Mehmed's admiral, Bolteoglu Suleiman Pasha, this navy was tasked with the critical role of blockading Constantinople from the sea. Its primary objectives were multifaceted: to prevent any supplies or crucial reinforcements from reaching the city's starving population and dwindling garrison, to harass and probe the less defended sea walls along the Marmara and Golden Horn, and to directly challenge the small, but determined, Byzantine and Allied fleets guarding the vital maritime approaches. The combined, overwhelming presence of such a massive land army and a formidable naval blockade effectively sealed Constantinople's fate, cutting it off entirely and brutally from the outside world, transforming the once thriving global hub into an isolated, vulnerable island. By April 2, 1453, the vanguard of the Ottoman army, a seemingly endless tide of men and equipment, arrived before Constantinople's land walls. Over the ensuing days, the vast Ottoman force systematically deployed itself along the entire length of the Theodosian walls, forming a formidable, menacing crescent of impending doom stretching some 4 miles, 6 kilometers, across the European peninsula, from the Marmara Sea to the Golden Horn. Sultan Mehmed himself established his meticulously planned headquarters opposite the Lycus Valley, a notoriously vulnerable section of the walls where the terrain naturally dipped, a point where past sieges had historically seen the heaviest fighting due to its comparatively lower elevation. Almost immediately, his engineers, a diverse corps of specialists from across his burgeoning empire, began the arduous and perilous work of digging extensive siege trenches, constructing massive earthen and timber ramps to bring the colossal cannons into optimal firing positions, and erecting formidable wooden siege towers, designed to eventually reach the height of the Byzantine battlements and allow troops to storm the walls directly. A palpable sense of methodical, overwhelming preparation permeated the vast Ottoman camp, a stark and chilling contrast to the desperate, frantic, and tragically last-minute repairs taking place within the beleaguered city. The formal declaration of the siege, the moment of no return, came with the dawn of April 6, 1453. With the meticulous positioning complete and the formidable cannons loaded with their massive stone projectiles, Sultan Mehmed gave the chilling order for the initial bombardment to commence. The roar that followed was unlike anything the city's inhabitants had ever heard or imagined. The colossal Great Bombard, along with dozens of its smaller, but still immensely powerful, brethren, unleashed a horrifying, earth-shattering barrage. Stone cannonballs, some weighing over half a ton, hurtled through the air with a terrifying whistle, striking the ancient, venerable walls with unimaginable force. Each impact sent profound shockwaves through the very foundations of the city, pulverizing sections of solid stone, sending clouds of dust and debris flying high into the sky, and echoing with a terrifying, bone-rattling thud that reverberated through every structure and every soul within the city. The psychological impact on the defenders and the civilian population was immediate, profound, and deeply traumatizing. For over a millennium, these walls had been their shield, their sacred protector, their symbol of divine protection and impregnability. Now, they were visibly, horrifyingly crumbling under the relentless, thunderous assault of this terrifying new technology. The myth of their unassailable strength was being shattered, stone by agonizing stone. The initial days of the siege quickly settled into a grueling, relentless cycle of devastating bombardment by day and desperate, frantic repair by night. The Ottomans, learning swiftly, focused their concentrated fire on specific, vulnerable sections, particularly around the Lycus Valley, aiming to create decisive breaches in the layered defenses. As soon as a section of the outer wall would collapse under the relentless pounding, waves of eager Ottoman infantry, including the zealous Azaps, would surge forward, attempting to exploit the breach and overwhelm the defenders. However, the Byzantines, though vastly outnumbered and exhausted, demonstrated extraordinary resilience and tactical ingenuity. Under the indefatigable leadership of Emperor Constantine XI and the brilliant Genos commander Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, who personally directed the most heavily contested sections, they fought with a desperate ferocity. Giustiniani, a master of defensive tactics and rapid engineering, proved remarkably adept at rapidly organizing repairs, often working through the bitter cold of the night to shore up damaged sections with timber, rubble, and even bundles of sticks and dirt. The city's inherent defensive advantages, the deep moat, the spacious outer terrace, and the tiered nature of the Theodosian walls, also played their crucial part, making it incredibly difficult for the Ottoman infantry to maintain momentum and reach the inner wall once they penetrated the initial outer defenses. On the maritime front, a small, yet remarkably determined, Byzantine fleet, bolstered by the crucial presence of Venetian and Genoese ships, managed to achieve a critical early success that briefly lifted the city's spirits. They had, prior to the siege, stretched a massive iron chain across the mouth of the Golden Horn, extending from the city's walls across to the Genoese suburb of Galata, which, while officially neutral, largely maintained cautious sympathy for the Byzantines. This ingenious and formidable chain effectively blocked the vastly superior Ottoman navy from entering the vital Golden Horn harbor, protecting the city's vulnerable sea walls along that flank and allowing the Byzantine ships to operate in relative safety within the harbor. This forced Mehmed's fleet to remain in the more open waters of the Bosphorus, hindering their ability to directly threaten the less fortified northern side of the city. Despite the initial ferocity and the unprecedented scale of the Ottoman assault, the first weeks of the siege presented significant and frustrating challenges for Sultan Mehmed. The ancient walls of Constantinople, even in their state of disrepair, proved remarkably resilient, absorbing prodigious amounts of punishment from the new gunpowder artillery. The defenders, though vastly outnumbered, were fiercely determined and skillfully led, exploiting every defensive advantage their unique city offered. Mehmed too quickly realized that this would not be a swift conquest, as he might have initially hoped. The ancient bulwark of Constantinople would not yield easily. Its fall would demand every ounce of his strategic ingenuity, his relentless will, and the full, relentless might of his formidable, technologically advanced war machine. The grind of the siege had only just begun. Chapter 5. A city under duress, mid-siege challenges and turning points. As the initial fury of the Ottoman assault subsided, Constantinople settled into the grinding, soul-crushing rhythm of a prolonged siege. The early days had seen the ancient walls withstand the thunderous cannonades, and the small band of defenders, though perilously few, had proven remarkably resilient, repelling the initial probing attacks. Yet, Sultan Mehmed II was a man of unyielding resolve and startling, almost audacious, ingenuity. The mid-siege period would be defined not just by the relentless pounding of his cannons, but by his boldest tactical gambits and the desperate, often seemingly miraculous, resilience of the Byzantines, transforming the beleaguered city into a claustrophobic, ever-shrinking stage for an epic struggle of wills and technological prowess. One of the most defining and psychologically critical moments of the entire siege, a fleeting flicker of hope amidst the encroaching gloom, occurred on April 20, 1453. As the exhausted defenders gazed out over the waters of the Marmara Sea, a sight that had become agonizingly rare, they beheld a miracle: the distinct silhouettes of 4 ships sailing purposefully towards Constantinople. These were 3 heavily armed Genoese galleys, chartered by the Pope and laden with vital supplies, and 1 venerable Byzantine transport ship, carrying desperately needed grain, oil, wine, and, most crucially, a small but significant contingent of reinforcements, a combined force of perhaps 700 seasoned men, ready to join the beleaguered garrison. This tiny flotilla represented the last, dwindling hope of direct, tangible Western aid. From his commanding position on a hill overlooking the Bosphorus, Sultan Mehmed, witnessing their approach with his own eyes, was seized by a furious, almost uncontrollable rage. He immediately dispatched an unequivocal order to his admiral, Bolteoglu Suleiman Pasha, to intercept them at all costs, demanding their capture or destruction. The Ottoman fleet, numbering over 100 ships, a formidable armada of galleys, brigantines, and fustas, far outnumbering the Christian vessels, moved with menacing speed to block their path. What ensued was a dramatic and desperate sea battle, fought directly within sight of the city walls, transforming the waters of the Marmara into a canvas of smoke, desperation, and desperate courage. The 4 Christian ships, though few, were significantly heavier, taller, and better armed for the close-quarters combat that was inevitable, their towering forecastles and stern castles giving their archers, crossbowmen, and early handgunners a decisive, elevated advantage against the lower decks of the more numerous Ottoman galleys. As the Ottoman ships swarmed them, attempting to grapple and board from all sides, the Christian crews fought with a ferocity born of sheer desperation and a clear understanding of the monumental stakes. They rained down bolts, arrows, and even heavy stones, repelling border after border with brutal efficiency, while expertly using their larger size and greater momentum to simply crush or ram smaller Ottoman vessels that pressed too close. Admiral Boltoglu himself, in a fury, was seen screaming orders, urging his men forward from his flagship, but the Christian captains, particularly the skilled Genos Giustiniani Longo, whose ship was among the largest, maneuvered their limited vessels with exceptional skill and daring, eventually breaking through the chaotic Ottoman blockade. With the setting sun casting long, golden shadows, they sailed triumphantly past the humiliated Ottoman fleet and into the protected waters of the Golden Horn, having secured their precious cargo and delivered a monumental, if temporary, morale boost to the starving, exhausted, and increasingly despairing defenders. From the city walls, citizens and soldiers alike erupted in joyous, desperate cheers, a fleeting moment of elation and renewed hope amidst the encroaching gloom. Sultan Mehmed, conversely, was said to be incandescent with rage, his fury so intense that he reportedly rode his horse directly into the shallow waters of the sea, verbally lashing out at his admiral for this profound and humiliating failure to prevent such a small, vital relief force from reaching his prey. The success of the Genos convoy, however, only galvanized Mehmed's already unyielding resolve to overcome the crucial obstacle that still protected the city's vulnerable northern flank, the Golden Horn chain. This massive iron chain, stretched with immense effort across the mouth of the harbor from the city's walls to the Genos suburb of Galata, which remained officially neutral but largely sympathetic to the Byzantines, effectively rendered his powerful navy useless against the city's less defended sea walls along that flank. Mehmed, unwilling to be thwarted by such a seemingly simple defensive measure, conceived an audacious and seemingly impossible engineering feat. He would move his ships overland, entirely bypassing the chain and launching them directly into the Golden Horn from the Bosphorus side. This incredible feat of engineering and raw manpower began almost immediately after the naval defeat, demonstrating Mehmed's brilliance and the Ottoman Empire's unparalleled organizational capacity. Over a period of several days, thousands of Ottoman laborers, supported by skilled engineers and carpenters, constructed a massive, carefully greased slipway of meticulously laid log rollers, roughly a mile and a half, 2.4 kilometers, long, across the steep, undulating hill of Galata. Under the cover of darkness, and with astonishing speed, dozens of Ottoman light galleys, transport vessels, and smaller fusters were systematically pulled out of the Bosphorus, dragged overland across the greased timbers by teams of oxen and legions of men, their sails often unfurled to catch the wind and provide additional propulsion, and then relaunched into the protected waters of the Golden Horn. The sight of Ottoman ships suddenly appearing inside the Golden Horn on April 22 sent shockwaves of sheer despair and terror through the already traumatized populace of Constantinople. It was a tactical stroke of breathtaking genius, a move utterly unexpected and seemingly defying the very laws of physics and the limitations of 15th-century engineering. The strategic implications were immediate and devastating. The city's sea walls along the Golden Horn, historically much less fortified due to the chain's perceived protection, were now directly vulnerable to a naval assault. This catastrophic development forced the already perilously thin Byzantine defense to stretch even further, diverting precious men and desperately needed resources away from the primary land walls in the Lycus Valley, where the main Ottoman attacks were relentlessly concentrated. The Byzantines, in a desperate but clumsy attempt to counter this new threat, launched a counterattack with fireships against the newly positioned Ottoman fleet within the Golden Horn, but it was poorly coordinated and fiercely repelled with significant losses, further dampening their already fragile morale. Beneath the thunder of the cannons and the clang of steel on the surface, another, more subtle, but equally deadly form of warfare unfolded: mining and countermining. Sultan Mehmed's engineers, a diverse group that often included experienced Serbian miners and other skilled sappers, began to dig intricate networks of tunnels deep beneath the imposing Theodosian walls, aiming to either undermine and collapse entire sections of the ramparts or to create hidden entry points for Ottoman troops to suddenly emerge inside the city. This subterranean struggle was claustrophobic, terrifying, and brutally efficient, a silent war fought in the dark. However, the Byzantines possessed their own secret weapon in this grim underground conflict: a brilliant German engineer named Johannes Grant. Grant, possibly with extensive background in mining operations, proved extraordinarily adept at detecting the Ottoman tunnels. He employed ingenious methods, such as listening for faint digging sounds through brass bowls placed on the ground, observing subtle movements of soil, or even using the vibrations of a taut drum skin. Once detected, Byzantine counterminers would rapidly dig their own tunnels to intercept the Ottoman shafts. Horrific underground battles would then erupt in the pitch darkness, often fought with pickaxes, shovels, and knives in stifling, oxygen-deprived air. These encounters frequently involved the deadly deployment of Greek fire, hurled into the enemy tunnels to suffocate or incinerate the Ottoman miners. Thanks to Grant's remarkable ingenuity and the desperate bravery of the Byzantine sappers, virtually every Ottoman mining attempt was detected and neutralized, frustrating Mehmed's efforts to break the walls from below and forcing him to rely solely on the brutal effectiveness of his artillery. As the siege dragged on through late April and into May, the sheer physical and psychological toll on Constantinople's dwindling defenders mounted relentlessly. Day after day, the Great Bombard and dozens of other Ottoman cannons continued their pulverizing, earth-shattering barrage. While constant, heroic repairs were undertaken by men, women, and even children, the cumulative damage was undeniable. The outer wall, in many sections, had been reduced to vast piles of rubble, and even the mighty inner wall, the last bastion, showed increasing signs of strain, its massive stones shattered and its mortar pulverized by the relentless impacts. The defenders, often working without rest through the night to patch up breaches with timber, earth, and whatever debris they could find, were utterly exhausted, their bodies aching, their minds frayed. Food and fresh water, though not yet critically scarce thanks to the limited supplies brought in by Giustiniani's convoy, were dwindling at an alarming rate, and the prospect of starvation loomed larger with each passing day. The omnipresent, terrifying threat of death, by cannonball, by arrow, by early firearm, or by sudden, overwhelming assault, created an atmosphere of pervasive, grinding fear that permeated every corner of the city. Sultan Mehmed, sensing the city's increasing desperation and the deepening cracks in its resolve, made several formal offers of surrender to Emperor Constantine XI. These offers, which notably included allowing the population to depart unharmed with their possessions if they paid a tribute, or even offering to evacuate the emperor and his court, were repeatedly and steadfastly refused by Constantine. The emperor, acutely aware of his historical responsibility, the immense legacy he represented, and determined to die defending his ancestral capital and the last vestiges of the Roman Empire, knew that true surrender meant the absolute end of everything his empire had represented for over 1,000 years. This unwavering defiance, a testament to his own courage and tragic sense of duty, however, only pushed the city deeper into the abyss of its final, inevitable stand. Within the battered walls, amidst the despair, religious fervor intensified. Processions became more frequent, with sacred icons paraded through the streets, accompanied by fervent prayers for divine intervention and miraculous deliverance. Yet, even these powerful displays of faith were tinged with deep anxiety and the lingering bitterness of internal discord. Omens and prophecies, both Christian and pagan, circulated wildly amongst the populace, reflecting the desperate psychological state of the besieged. A sudden, unexplained fog that mysteriously enveloped the city, obscuring it from both attackers and what little light remained, was interpreted by some as a direct sign of God's abandonment. Eclipses and spectacular lightning strikes were seen as portents of doom. Despite these anxieties and mounting superstitious fears, a core of desperate resolve remained amongst the beleaguered defenders, particularly the small band of professional soldiers like Giustiniani Longo's highly effective Genos and the emperor's last loyal Byzantines. They knew with chilling certainty that the fate of the city, and indeed of an entire epoch, rested entirely on their ability to hold the increasingly battered walls for just a little longer, even as the Ottoman war machine outside showed no sign of relenting. The relentless grinding attrition, the ceaseless bombardments, the audacious flanking maneuvers, and the unyielding pressure had pushed Constantinople to its ultimate breaking point. The endgame was fast, terrifyingly fast, approaching. Chapter 6: The Final Deluge, the Last Assault and the Fall. For nearly 2 months, the Ottoman siege had been a relentless, grinding war of attrition, a test of wills, and a brutal clash of nascent gunpowder technology against the ancient, resilient stone of the Theodosian walls. But Sultan Mehmed II, chafing under the protracted struggle and eager to consolidate his nascent empire's dominance over the region, knew with absolute certainty that the time for a decisive stroke had arrived. The final, cataclysmic act was upon them, a culmination of centuries of historical forces. On the evening of May 26, just days before the chosen date, Sultan Mehmed convened his most momentous war council, a tense gathering of his most senior viziers, seasoned generals, and influential religious scholars. The atmosphere in the Sultan's tent was thick with tension and suppressed dissent. Some of his most experienced advisers, notably the venerable Grand Vizier Halil Pasha, argued passionately for a negotiated peace. They cited the heavy Ottoman casualties sustained during the relentless bombardments and skirmishes, the immense logistical strain of sustaining such a colossal army for weeks, and the very real and ever-present risk of a unified Christian relief force finally emerging from the West. Halil Pasha believed that further losses were unnecessary, and a negotiated surrender could still secure Ottoman victory without further bloodshed. But Mehmed, young yet utterly unyielding in his vision and conviction, dismissed these cautious, pragmatic voices with a steely resolve. His belief in his own destiny, fueled by a deep and personal reading of Islamic prophecies foretelling the conquest of Constantinople, "Verily you shall conquer Constantinople. What a wonderful conqueror he will be, and what a wonderful army will that army be," was unshakable. He articulated his strategic rationale with chilling, absolute clarity. The city, though battered and weakened, remained a dangerous thorn in the very heart of his empire's burgeoning territories, and its capture was utterly essential for the complete Ottoman dominion over both Anatolia and the Balkans. He would accept nothing less than total, unequivocal victory. His resolve settled and his will imposed, Mehmed then rode tirelessly through his vast, sprawling camp, moving amongst the hundreds of thousands of his assembled troops. His voice, amplified by his fierce charisma and an almost messianic zeal, cut through the eager anticipation of the approaching battle, stirring their fervor with promises of immense, untold riches to be found within the fabled city, the glorious rewards of martyrdom for those who fell in battle, and the divine spiritual reward for conquering such a profoundly symbolic prize for Islam. He painted a vivid, alluring picture of the wealth awaiting them, promised the traditional 3 days of plunder as per ancient custom for conquered cities, and appealed directly to their religious zeal, portraying the conquest of Constantinople as a sacred duty, a divine mandate. The atmosphere in the vast Ottoman camp, stretching for miles outside the walls, crackled with a terrifying, almost palpable energy. A vast, meticulously disciplined multitude, united by fervent ambition and unwavering faith, ready to unleash its full, annihilating force. The date was set for the grand, final assault, Tuesday, May 29, 1453. Within the city's desperately battered walls, the atmosphere was a complex and harrowing tapestry of grim determination mingled with a profound sense of fatalism. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, acutely aware that the end was tragically, inevitably near, delivered his own, immortal speech to his loyal, dwindling defenders on the evening of May 28, standing amidst his exhausted, outnumbered troops, a motley but courageous mix of Byzantines, Genoese, Venetians, Cretans, and other brave volunteers. He spoke not of the impossible dream of victory, but of sacrifice, of their sacred duty to God, to their cherished homeland, and to the thousand-year legacy of Rome that flowed through their veins. He acknowledged their immense, unimaginable bravery in the face of overwhelming odds, reminded them of the sanctity of their Christian cause, and invoked the glorious memory of their ancestors and their unwavering faith. It was a plea for a glorious, heroic last stand, a desperate, rallying cry to defend their beloved city and its sacred churches to the very last breath, to ensure that the final chapter would be one of defiance, not surrender. Many wept openly, moved by his words and the terrible weight of the moment, but beneath the tears lay a renewed, desperate resolve, a steely determination to face their fate. The last religious services were held in the city's churches, a poignant communal prayer for divine intervention, as priests and citizens processed through the streets, carrying sacred icons, a solemn preparation for the unimaginable horror about to descend. For many, it was their final communion, their farewell to life itself. As the pre-dawn hours of May 29 bled into a cold, dark morning, illuminated only by the flickering torches of the Ottoman army and the ominous glow of their campfires, the final, apocalyptic assault began. It was not a single, uncoordinated attack, but a meticulously planned series of waves, designed with brutal efficiency to systematically exhaust, demoralize, and ultimately overwhelm the city's few, weary defenders. The first wave consisted primarily of the Bashabazouks, the irregular, often undisciplined auxiliary troops drawn from across the diverse territories of the Ottoman Empire. Numbering in the tens of thousands, these irregulars were thrown at the walls with reckless, almost suicidal abandon, forming a human tide designed to absorb the first fury of the Byzantine defense, to blunt their arrows, and, most critically, to exhaust the defenders' limited ammunition and energy. Their attack was utterly chaotic, brutal, and deafening, filled with a cacophony of shouts, screams, and the clanging of makeshift weapons against stone. While their casualties were astronomically high, creating mounds of dead at the base of the walls, they served their gruesome purpose, forcing the defenders to expend precious ammunition, physical manpower, and psychological energy in repelling a relentless, if disorganized, tide. Following this initial, chaotic deluge came the second wave. The more disciplined, better organized, and more heavily armed regular Ottoman forces, primarily Anatolian Turks, seasoned by years of relentless warfare on various fronts. These troops were equipped with better armor and weapons, and their attacks were more focused, aimed with precision at specific breaches and weakened sections of both the outer and inner walls that the cannon fire had created. The fighting intensified dramatically, becoming a brutal, prolonged hand-to-hand struggle across the shattered ramparts and within the exposed gaps. The defenders, already exhausted from hours of repelling the first wave, fought with desperate, almost superhuman ferocity, repelling assault after assault, the air thick with the twang of bowstrings, the whiz of countless arrows, the crack of early firearms, and the relentless, metallic clash of steel against steel. It was during this critical, desperate phase, as the relentless pressure mounted, that a fateful and profoundly unfortunate turning point occurred, a moment of profound misfortune that would prove devastating for the Byzantines. Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, the brilliant Genoese commander who had been instrumental in repairing the walls, coordinating the defense, and personally leading the most effective contingent near the crucial Lycus Valley breach, the primary target of Ottoman artillery, was struck down. Accounts vary on the exact nature of his injury, perhaps a crossbow bolt to his arm or leg, or a fragment from a devastating cannonball, but the effect was immediate and catastrophic. Despite Emperor Constantine's desperate pleas for him to remain and continue commanding, Giustiniani, in agonizing pain and bleeding heavily, insisted on being carried away to his ship within the Golden Horn for urgent medical treatment. His sudden, forced withdrawal sent a wave of utter despair through his highly effective, specialized Genoese contingent. Without their charismatic, skilled, and personally loyal leader, morale plummeted instantly, and their disciplined ranks began to fray. Seeing their commander leave the front, many of his men, mercenaries loyal to him personally rather than the beleaguered city, began to abandon their posts, leaving a crucial section of the defenses dangerously exposed, severely weakened, and utterly vulnerable. Sultan Mehmed II, ever vigilant and observing the battle from a distance, with a general's keen eye for opportunity, immediately sensed this critical moment of weakness and demoralization. With the defenders exhausted from hours of continuous combat and a key part of their line faltering, he unleashed his ultimate, most formidable weapon, the third wave, comprised of his elite janissaries. These were his shock troops, the unyielding core of his army, their discipline unbreakable, their loyalty absolute. Personally led and spurred forward by Mehmed himself, who rode among them, the janissaries launched their final, overwhelming assault. With disciplined precision and an almost terrifying ferocity, they focused their relentless charge directly on the very breach in the inner wall that Giustiniani had been defending, and simultaneously at a small, strategically vital postern gate, perhaps the legendary Kerkeporter Gate, which some accounts claim may have been left partially unbarred or unsecured in the chaos. The janissaries poured through the breach, a disciplined torrent of steel, burning zeal, and relentless will, their war cries echoing through the crumbling defenses. The few remaining defenders at that point, utterly exhausted, demoralized by Giustiniani's departure, and overwhelmed by the sheer weight of numbers, were simply swamped. The chilling cry, "The city has fallen," or "The Turk is in the city," erupted from within the walls, spreading panic like wildfire through the civilian population and the remaining, scattered defenders. The defense, after more than 50 days of heroic resistance, irrevocably crumbled. In this moment of ultimate, cataclysmic catastrophe, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos fulfilled his solemn, heroic vow. Casting off his imperial insignia, his distinctive purple cloak, his imperial boots, his golden crown, so that his body would not be identified and desecrated by the enemy, he plunged into the thickest of the fighting, leading his last handful of loyal Byzantines and brave foreign volunteers in a desperate, suicidal charge against the overwhelming Ottoman tide. He fought as a common soldier, a final, defiant, and profoundly symbolic act of a Roman emperor who refused to surrender his city, choosing death in battle over subjugation. His ultimate fate remains shrouded in the chaotic maelstrom of that final struggle, his body never definitively identified amidst the carnage, but his heroic death in that final maelstrom solidified his legacy as a tragic, yet glorious, defender of the empire, marking the end of an era. As the janissaries and other Ottoman forces streamed into the city, chaos, terror, and systematic plunder descended upon Constantinople. The initial phase of the conquest, for approximately 3 days as per ancient custom and Mehmed's decree, was one of sanctioned plunder, violence, and systematic enslavement. Thousands of citizens, particularly those who resisted the invaders, were put to the sword in brutal street fighting. Others fled in desperate terror, seeking what little sanctuary they could find in the city's holiest places, particularly its magnificent churches. The most iconic and heartbreaking moment of this desperate flight was the rush to the awe-inspiring Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral of holy wisdom. Thousands of men, women, and children crowded into its vast, echoing interior, clinging to its sacred icons, believing, in their desperation, that its hallowed walls and divine protection would shield them from the rampaging soldiers. But the great bronze doors of Hagia Sophia, once impenetrable, were eventually battered down by axes. The sacred sanctuary was violated, its priceless holy art plundered or destroyed, and its terrified occupants, including the clergy, were cruelly enslaved. Within hours, a muezzin climbed to its highest dome, calling the Muslim faithful to prayer, echoing through the once Christian nave, symbolically marking its immediate and profound transformation into a mosque. The triumphant banner of the Ottoman Empire, emblazoned with its crescent moon, was raised over the city's highest points, a stark and unequivocal declaration of a new era. Sultan Mehmed II himself made his solemn, triumphant entry into Constantinople later that very day, riding his white horse through the now shattered and breached gates of the Lycus Valley section of the Theodosian walls. His first public act, after performing humble prayers in a hastily established makeshift mosque, was to ride directly to Hagia Sophia. Accounts describe him, upon seeing the immense grandeur of its interior and the initial destruction wrought by his soldiers, ordering an immediate halt to the plunder within its sacred confines. He then knelt in prayer, a powerful and deeply symbolic act of his claim to the city and his profound intention to transform it, not merely destroy it. He subsequently issued a formal decree promising safety and protection to the remaining inhabitants, ordering the widespread violence and looting to cease, though the process of bringing the city fully under control took several days. Mehmed's vision for Constantinople was not its ruin, but its rebirth as Istanbul, the grand and undisputed capital of his new, burgeoning universal empire, a magnificent bridge between two worlds, much as it had always been. But its identity was forever changed, its Christian Roman legacy now fused with a vibrant new Islamic Ottoman identity. The fall of Constantinople was more than just the capture of a city, it was the definitive, symbolic end of the Roman Empire, a continuous political entity that had spanned over 2 millennia. A new epoch, an Ottoman, Islamic epoch, had truly begun, fundamentally reshaping the geopolitical and cultural landscape of the world for centuries to come. Conclusion: the dawn of a new era. The fall of Constantinople on May 29, 1453, after a siege of 53 brutal days, marked far more than the capture of a single city. It was an event that irrevocably altered the course of history, drawing a definitive line under an entire epoch and ushering in another. The ancient walls, which had stood impregnable for over a millennium, finally succumbed to the overwhelming might of Sultan Mehmed II's colossal army and his terrifying new artillery. The heroic, yet ultimately futile, defense led by Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos, who died fighting in the breach, epitomized the last desperate stand of an empire that had stubbornly refused to vanish for centuries after its perceived end. The immediate consequences of the city's fall were profound and immediate. Most significantly, it spelled the definitive end of the Roman Empire, a political entity that had traced its unbroken lineage back to Augustus in 27 BCE, spanning an astonishing 1,480 years. Its demise extinguished the last flickering flame of classical Roman civilization in the East and symbolically closed the curtain on the Middle Ages. For the burgeoning Ottoman Empire, the conquest was a monumental triumph. It solidified their status as the preeminent power in the Eastern Mediterranean, granting them uncontested control over the vital land and sea trade routes connecting Europe and Asia, specifically the lucrative Silk Road and the crucial spice routes. This stranglehold on existing trade routes would inadvertently spur Western European nations to seek new maritime passages to the east, thereby fueling the nascent age of exploration. The long-term impact rippled across continents. Culturally, the fall of Constantinople led to a significant exodus of Byzantine scholars and their invaluable collections of ancient Greek and Roman texts. These intellectual refugees, fleeing westward, carried with them a vast repository of classical knowledge that had been meticulously preserved and copied for centuries within the libraries of Constantinople. Their arrival in Italy and other parts of Western Europe provided a crucial impetus for the intellectual and artistic flowering known as the Renaissance, profoundly shaping the course of European thought and culture. Religiously, the transformation of the magnificent Hagia Sophia into a mosque symbolized a profound shift in power and left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of both Christian and Muslim worlds. For Christians, it was a source of immense grief and a rallying cry for crusades that never materialized effectively, deepening the enduring schism between Eastern Orthodoxy and Western Catholicism. For the Ottomans, it was a powerful affirmation of divine favor and imperial destiny, cementing their role as a global Islamic power. Under Ottoman rule, Constantinople, now known as Istanbul, rapidly transformed but was also remarkably preserved and revitalized. Mehmed II, far from laying it to ruin, embarked on a grand vision to rebuild and repopulate his new capital, inviting diverse communities to settle there and restoring its former glory as a thriving metropolis. It became the vibrant, multi-ethnic, and cosmopolitan heart of the Ottoman Empire for the next 5 centuries, a grand Islamic capital built upon a Roman foundation, seamlessly bridging East and West, much as it had always done. The fall of Constantinople remains one of history's most pivotal moments, a cataclysmic event that signaled the end of one world and the explosive beginning of another. It reminds us of the fragility of even the mightiest empires, the enduring human capacity for both defiance and ambition, and the profound, transformative power of a single, decisive moment in time. Its legacy continues to echo, a testament to the city's unique identity as a crossroads of civilizations, faiths, and destinies.